Thanks for coming. Some of this is very difficult for me, but I'll get through it. My memory is anywhere close to what it used to be, so I need to read most of mine. I tried doing an outline and speaking to it, but I'd lose track of where I was and the words and everything else. So I'm not an expert on the Vietnam War. My knowledge is limited to just one aspect of the war from my personal experiences. I'll be speaking for myself only. Since everyone's military experience varied for the following reasons: their branch of service, country their unit was operated in, their job description or MOS, terrain, populated or unpopulated, leadership in your unit all the way down to your squad leader, year or years in country, your individual makeup and background. With that in mind, I'll give you some of my background. I was a pastor's kid who lived in Pine River, Minnesota, a small town about 30 miles north of Brainerd, until the 6th grade. We fished, boated, camped, shot BB guns, and generally stayed outside, played outside all the time. We moved to Superior, Wisconsin, where we rode horses, played woodsman, hunted with a .22, and continued to work as a paper boy so I'd be independently wealthy. We moved to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in the middle of my junior year in high school. I went to the University of Wisconsin until flunking out after my sophomore year. I could have appealed, but I didn't have a goal or motivation. I was drafted to go into the military on October 7th. They were also drafting Marines then, and I enlisted in the Army to start October 3rd. Part of the reason I didn't want to be a Marine was because my grandfather was a Marine in World War I and was oftentimes very grumpy. In hindsight, he may have had PTSD from the war. That's a relatively new diagnosis to the current war. There may be necessary wars, but there are certainly no good or great wars. I now feel that Vietnam was not a necessary war for us to fight. Yet, as an American citizen, I felt I had two moral options: to either fight for my country or fight against the war. The Peace Corps continued to ferment. Running away to Canada or other ways of avoiding the war were not acceptable to me. I was sent to basic training in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and it was worse than any prison in the United States. We were screamed at before we even got off the bus. Our hair, clothes, and any personal items were taken from us. Our time was controlled every minute without any opportunity to go anywhere on our own. If we did, we'd be declared AWL and sent to the break. We were physically and mentally pushed beyond any level a civilian would understand. Privacy was non-existent. Our room consisted of a long open barracks with double-stacked cots on both sides of the room. We had little choice of food and were expected to eat it in a minute and minutes without any conversation. We were paid about $80. Not $80 a day or a week, but $80 a month. We were given a multiple choice aptitude test during basic to help assign us an MOS or a job description. It was a pretty simple test with questions like the following: would you rather A, read a book, B, go for a hike, C, add a series of numbers, or D, climb a mountain? Knowing that I wanted to avoid the infantry, I, of course, selected reading a book or adding numbers. Well, that wasn't really who I was. My infantry score was the lowest of all possible jobs, but we were also tested in marksmanship, where I scored sharpshooter in both M14 and M16. Then we were tested in physical proficiency at the end of basics, where I received a plaque for the highest PT score in my company of about 200. So my competitiveness rendered a great aptitude test score irrelevant, and I was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington for advanced infantry training. Although it's a beautiful area, it was not an enjoyable time to spend outside there. We rarely had any sunshine, but had lots of rain and wet snow. I graduated with the highest academic testing score. My company was promoted to PSC, which is a private E3. Saigon was, to me, similar to the real world. They had paved streets and buses. The transportation varied, and there were little scooters and stuff. But that's probably an Arvin truck that's being used to transport civilians, or maybe for a commercial enterprise. I don't know. I thought those cool looking old trucks, but this was 50 years ago, so maybe they weren't sold at that time. After flying my commercial plane to Saigon, so we're on a regular airline with stewardess and everything, we came in low. We traveled over a swampy, brushy area for miles low, and we were thinking we might be shot down any minute. Why are they flying so low? Obviously, we weren't. I was assigned to the 4th Infantry based in Pleiku. In Vietnam, in the 4th Infantry Division, our normal operation involved being flown by helicopters to a landing zone, or LZ, which was an open area of the jungle. We would then patrol around, moving about 10 to 20 kilometers a day, with occasional helicopter move from one spot to another. We always kept a 360-degree perimeter, which was necessary for our survival. We carried everything we needed to live and fight in our backpacks. We were usually supplied by helicopter every 3 or 4 days, with sea rations, mail, ammo if needed, and a clean set of fatigues. After 4 weeks or so, with 1 week spent on a fire base, we'd be flown back to base camp to get showers, clean fatigues, and a night off. Then 2 days later, it all repeated in a different area. We went on some road convoys. Oftentimes the first truck was what they called a gun truck. It was plates of steel were around it, and they had a couple guys in it with M50s. And then we were in Dusenhaus. The man on the left was the man who walked slack for me when I walked point. That's Mario. He had equivalent of a 5th or 6th grade education. And every time I see someone talk about exporting or sending Mexican Americans back, my hackles go up. The guy on the right was from Texas. You can guess what his nickname was. The guy on the left was our medic. All our medics were called Doc. He had a black belt in karate. He was from New Hampshire. He was shot in Vietnam. They medevaced him with a cable in the middle of the night, with a cable that came down through the jungle, and he was taken out that way. The guy next to him was one of the nicest men I've ever known, in Paulo. When we go along the back roads, all the roads were maybe a single lane paved, but otherwise it was dirt roads. The kids in the villages would come out, and they'd do either one of two things. Either they'd all wave and say, GI number one, hoping we'd throw candy or sea rations or something, or they'd all give us a finger and yell GI number 10, hoping we'd throw sea rations at them. Both things were probably successful for them. The bridges were generally guarded by Republican Korean soldiers who we held a lot of respect for. In the summer, in the dry seasons, there was a road that would go around the bridge. Obviously, in the wet season, you couldn't go that way. I'll have more on the Republican Korean soldiers later. So here, there's probably 10 Dusenhaus loaded with soldiers, a bunch of helicopters waiting for evacuation. In the military, there's always a hurry up and wait. So we might sit in those trucks for an hour waiting to go. A lot of my pictures are going to be in open areas and flat areas. Our area of operation was generally triple canopy jungle very mountainous, similar to the Adirondacks. But when I was actually in the bush, I didn't take many pictures. So in this case, the gun truck following us also, they were allowed to paint sort of individual things like the old fighter planes of World War II. From Pleiku, we were trucked in a convoy of open Doosanhouse to a fire base on a river next to a small village. They allowed us to go swimming or wading, because it wasn't deep enough to really swim. And we observed a loach, which is a small egg-shaped helicopter. One of the neatest helicopters I ever saw. He was flying over us, going up the river. He stopped directly on top of us, and then zoom, he took off like a hummingbird. That night, shortly after sunset, a mortar at a distant mountain. Almost all of our fire bases were on top of the mountain. This one wasn't. Started shooting at us. The first one landed about 200 yards away in a field, and they started walking it towards us about 25 yards at a time. So they weren't very proficient. Their first one was quite a bit short, and their next ones were too short. 25 closer each time. So we hear the pop, and we'd see the smoke in the distant mountain. Then we'd see the explosion in front of us, and every time the explosion would move closer and closer to us. After about the fifth shot, an M60 machine gun opened up in tracers. Every fifth or sixth round was a tracer, so you could actually see where the bullet went. But you could also see that these bullets were falling way short before they reached the mortar. They were falling off. Then finally an M50 50 caliber machine gun opened up and the mortar stopped. You could see the tracers going right up into that area. So here I was, a 21-year-old virgin halfway around the globe, shot at before I even reached my company. Any thought of wanting to get in battle left me at that time, never to return. My parents had been after me to send them pictures of myself. I'd been sending nothing but sunsets and sunrises, because when you're on a base camp, I saw the most beautiful sunrises and sunsets anyone will ever see anywhere. There was no light pollution. There tended to be clouds, and you need some clouds to have a beautiful sunset or sunrise. I finally sent a picture of my boots. This is taken in the base camp, obviously. You can see I've got clean fatigue pants, and the ground isn't a jungle floor. I said, this is me. That's where I spend my time, on my boots. Two days later, I was sent by helicopter from that fire base to my company on a resupply berth. My company commander was very friendly, asked me where I was from before passing me on to my platoon. There, my name was changed to Andy, short for Anderson, because there were already 2 Steves in my platoon. More on that later. Give you an idea of the size of the pack I carried. I've got to apologize for the pictures. I don't know if it's the hot weather or the moisture or what, but a lot of I'm not a good picture taker, first of all, but a lot of my pictures didn't work out very well. M79 grenade launcher. People didn't want to carry it because it didn't provide much personal protection. You had a single shot grenade launcher that wouldn't go off until they had traveled about, 25 yards or so. I had been assigned an M16 in base camp, which was swapped for the M79 grenade launcher next week. No one wanted to carry one because they didn't have much personal protection. Later, when I agreed to walk point, I was given, I don't remember the name of it, but it was basically an M16 with a grenade launcher mounted underneath it. It was kind of an over and under weapon. For all those people with an AR-15 or similar weapons with small caliber, you should know that one of the reasons they went to a small caliber was more likely to injure a combatant than the larger bullet, which had more stopping, shock, or killing power. The military felt it was more valuable to injure an enemy soldier than kill them, because a dead soldier is one less soldier, while the injured soldier tied up at least 2 other soldiers, because you needed other soldiers to carry them out, plus then you needed other soldiers and as nurses and doctors and aid stations. So an injured soldier would be a loss of 3. So they also redesigned the grenade from a pineapple, which had blew large chunks of metal, to a small baseball, which was covered in BBs. The Claymore was also designed in a similar manner, having a plastic shell covered in BBs backed by C4. Of course, soldiers didn't want enemy soldiers around that were wounded, because many of them can still kill you. As an aside, why would anyone buy a rifle with a built-in ram to clear jams like an M16 or AR-15? Wouldn't you be better off with a rifle less likely to jam? A lot of times we'd be shipped to somewhere. The main reason I wanted to show this picture, you can't see it well, but if you look in the background, sort of the center left, there's a Chinook with hanging underneath it is a load of ammo or something you bring in, and you see the huge cloud of dust. The prop wash from some of these helicopters was literally knock you off your feet, the big ones. I didn't think I was exposed to Agent Orange, but looking back at this picture, maybe I was, because this obviously isn't a natural condition of trees in the jungle. This is at a fire base. At this fire base, many of our fire bases, we had concertina wire around, but the jungle often came right up to the edge, so it was kind of scary that an enemy soldier could come in close and shoot you from the cover of the jungle. This was the only time that I saw a USO show. So if you look, here's a big Chinook helicopter bringing in supplies. We never flew on a Chinook because if they were shot down, you'd lose 25 or 30 men instead of 5 or 10 men. The reason there isn't a big dust storm is if you look, everything, the ground's wet, and the plastic and the ponchos and stuff are wet. So what's actually blowing up over there is water and probably a smoke grenade. So if you look real close, right in the middle, you can see a band sort of in the middle of the fire base, and people are sitting around watching the band. That was our USO show. We never saw Bob Hope or any of the stars. We weren't in leech areas very often, but when we were, you could tell by the blood on our pants and shirts around the openings. The leech would inject an anticoagulant to keep blood flowing and pain deadened, so you wouldn't notice when they bit you. The first time I was in a leech area, we had contact with the enemy in the morning, and had uniforms that had been sweated and slept on the ground for several days, combined with rain, so kind of clammy. And once you found one, you imagine there are other places also. That night I was trying to sleep, but was kept awake by these phantoms and real leeches. But knew my turn for guard duty was approaching and I needed sleep. I was almost asleep when I scratched my neck and felt a leech. I grabbed it and pulled it off, threw it, and I wanted to sit up and yell. I just wanted to, ah! But of course I couldn't. So I lay back again and tried to sleep. Just before I fell asleep, I felt something, a snake or a rat, crawl over my legs. But I decided then that that was just the way it was, and I bet I was asleep in several minutes. You'd be surprised what you can adjust to. I always smile when people say, I would have gone crazy or mad if just one more bad thing had happened. The first time I saw a live enemy soldier, I think, was at the fire base we were sent to immediately before going into Cambodia. I was awake on guard duty at a bunker in front of a 155 artillery. These were too large to be carried in by helicopters, so you only saw these in places that were supplied by trucks. They were far louder than our 105s, which we had on our fire bases. Yet I could sleep through fire missions they conducted at night, but wake completely when someone whispered, Andy. I only saw the soldier for a second in front of my position and did not fire because of SRPs, primarily. An SRP is a short-range patrol we sent out every night from a fire base, usually in 4 directions. 2 to 3 men would go out with a radio and a bandolier of clips for their M16s, and nothing else virtually. Leaving as it was turning dark, go for about 2-3 kilometers away to hide out as an early warning for the fire base. But some of my buddies told me that they didn't go more than 50 yards out because they were afraid to go further. I alerted the next bunker, my replacement. He was in the same bunker with me, that I had seen someone just outside the water. 2 days later in Cambodia, we were told that sappers came through that place, throwing charges into both of those bunkers and the 155s behind it. This gives you an idea, this picture gives you an idea of how thick the jungles could be. If you look center a little bit down, you can actually see an M60 machine gun, but it's difficult to see anything else. This is probably 10, 15 yards away. The guy on the left was a shake and bake sergeant, and that was one of our machine gunners. This is Dave Battles. This is a man I'll talk to about later. And that skinny kid with the ribs showing out, I don't know who he is. But that's the same guy there. You took chances. We were at an LZ. You took chances sometimes. Later on, there was a bullet fired in that tree when we had contact. "95% of my water for our canteens came from the mountain stream near us. I always added an iodine pill to make it taste bad, but also to kill some of the organisms in it. In Cambodia during the dry season, we had trouble finding water, but in a dry riverbed we found a puddle about 10 feet across in diameter that was about 2 inches deep, that was solidly covered by water bugs. They had nowhere else to go. I didn't hesitate to push them aside and fill my empty canteens I had. When you've gone without water for a while, your priorities change. This is Steve. I said we'd get back to Steve later. This Steve had bought a tiger stripe uniform in the village by our base camp. We always had plain fatigues, we never had any camouflage. And asked me to take a picture for his wife and children. He was our other M60 machine gunner, who was one of 2 Steves in my platoon doing that ride. When he became short, with less than a month to go, he gave up his gun, but agreed to go on the first bird in to a move we were making. That helicopter had our platoon leader, our first lieutenant, who usually the officers would spend 6 months in the bush and then they'd have another 6 months in the rear area. At his choice, he decided to stay with his men in the rear area. He was about 9 months in. Our RTO, radio telephone operator, the gunner's assistant, and several NCO and several riflemen. It was shot down before the LZ, crashing into a stream with everyone killed. We landed here to set up a perimeter around it. Even though most of the helicopter was underwater, it had gotten so hot that rounds were cooking off underwater. I didn't have his address and wasn't sure if I should send that picture on to his family. I'll always regret that, and I have no way of contacting his family now. Helicopter assaults. Whenever a helicopter was landing, we'd always pop a smoke and we'd identify to the pilots what color it was, so they'd know they were in the right place. And if we had a hot LZ with the enemy there, we'd pop a red smoke and throw that in the direction of the enemy. In this case, it was probably for a fire run rather than a liftoff. I don't know. I don't remember. Flying over, we tend to fly over fairly flat country going to the mountains. We look down and we see villages and places where they had been farming that were now been abandoned. They'd moved their village and moved their farms. This is a mountaintop I saw that really stuck out. I don't know how it became this way, but I suspect that it probably had a recent bombing run. The jungle, we cleaned the jungle pretty fast, so we run across holes in the ground from bombs, but generally they'd be grown up. War had been going on in Vietnam for many decades. Sitting inside a Huey or a Slick, you can see the pilot and the assistant pilot or co-pilot, and then we'd sit on the edge or in the middle, hang out, and we could look out over the countryside. And the guy there on the right was Scotty. He was my squad leader. He was the one I took over for a report. There's actually some these are Montagnards. Montagnards in Vietnam are similar to American Indians. The men tend to wear groin cross. The women were often topless. The reason these kids had those helicopters is they wanted to sell them to us. We're waiting for them to fly out in the bush at someplace. So you can see the men with the loincloths, and this woman has a shirt on, but barely. You can see all the helicopters lined up. We'd hurry up and get to these places early in the morning, and then we might sit around for several hours while they checked out the LZs or whatever they did, we don't know. Hurry up and wait. I walked point for a little less than half a year. I tried to use all my senses in training to give our platoon the best chance to get back alive. I'm not always sure what would alert me, as it might have been a combination of things that gave me heads up to take action. When I walked point, which is every other day, I was a leader and responsible for breaks, getting our next night's overnight spot by using topographical maps. We didn't have GPS. Judgment how far we traveled. Of course, my most important function was to ensure we never walked into an ambush. A lot of things were used to evaluate this, including the sense of smell, steam movement, missing twigs that NBA used then to eat their meals, trampled leaves, broken branches, and especially terrain. As a point man, we lost our pants, so we pulled the front of our pants tight across our shins, had a blousing below our knee and our boot. The reason we gave for doing this was so we could feel a tripwire and have a chance to stop before we tripped it. I never saw a tripwire, but we still did it as partly as a status thing to us. When we went to base camp, which was a couple days a month, we'd get showers, and here you can see the guys sitting around in the barracks we had. A bed with no mattress was preferable. Sunsets and sunrises on the base camps were awesome. This is a base camp at Anke. You can see we actually had some lights around the perimeter. Anke was a big base, and there were bunkers and guard towers in between. And if you look far right, you'll see a little foxhole. The second night, they'd have us out there in the foxhole, not because they needed us out there so much as they didn't want us idle. This is what's called a Huey or a Slick. That's how we made all our moves by air. It was a direct on, you can see the same type of helicopter Slick. They had two machine guns mounted in the back, M60s. And in this case, it was a pedestal mount. Many were suspended from the ceiling by a cable or a strap. This is an old style gunship. looked similar to a Huey. It had small little wings which had rocket pods, and it had a minigun in front. This was the Blue Ghost, the most impressive gunship we had. And it was coming on a mission on us. It would circle around like this, and you could see the side of it. And then when it came straight at you, you could see very little of it because it was only about 2 or 3 feet wide. The pilot and the gunner sat behind each other. They had a minigun in the front and rocket pods. Many people say that the AK-47 was the most frightening sound they heard. The most frightening sound I ever heard was a minigun firing over your head. You're used to machine guns with the This fired so fast it had, like the old Gatling guns, it had 5 barrels controlled by electric motor. And it would go, and then you'd hear the zip, 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 zip of ricochets going around. The thing that frightened a lot of us even more than being killed by the enemy was being killed in friendly fire, because that would be such a waste. We had a real love-hate with the helicopters. They took us out, but they also took us in. They brought us supplies, but they also told everyone around us where we were because they were very noisy. All of our platoon leaders were called tail gunner, which was the name of our platoon. The replacement for my first platoon leader, the one who was killed in the helicopter being shot down, didn't appear to fit the mold of an infantry officer. He had a fat, pimply face and seemed pretty mild-mannered and polite. We were set up from the night before waiting instructions on where we would go for a nearby resupply by helicopter. A squad of MDA attempted to break into our perimeter but was repelled. On their way back, they threw a grenade that landed into the position our LT was in, which was next to me. The LT immediately dove on top of it. Pretty much sure death to protect those around him. The grenade was a dud, so he rolled off it, throwing away from the position out at the same time. If it had gone off, killing him, I'm sure he would have been awarded with the Medal of Honor. I didn't see this as there was brush between my position and his. But the men in his position told me all about it. Later that day, the LT came to me and asked if I would write him up for a medal. I should have, but I told him that I couldn't because I didn't see it. I asked one of the men in his position. That was the guy I pointed out. I said, I talked to Billy to get the headband around his head. I wasn't going to write him up, he said, because if he was crazy enough to jump on a grenade, he didn't deserve a medal. After we got a resupply, we continued on our way with me at a point. He sent word up to me that he wanted to stop where we were for the night. When he came up to me, I explained that I didn't want to be there, but it wasn't a good position. He said he had orders that that's where we're spending the night. I said, okay, but let's put up a mechanical ambush on that junction. He agreed and had it done. Just before dark, the ambush was blown, and 6 NVA were killed by the Claymore. Another NVA soldier who was going around our position was killed by rifle fire. It was the only time I heard an enemy soldier die. What I heard was a long sigh out. I immediately knew someone had died about 15 yards in front of my position. A couple of weeks later, when Dennis was walking point and we were ambushed, and the LT was shot a couple of times in the stomach, we met a victim and another man up and never heard anything. I've mentioned how successful I was, so it's only fair that I add that there were 2 times that I could have been busted for refusing a direct order. Here's one of them. We just rotated to a fire base and needed to send out a patrol up a ridge by our fire base. This fire base was actually not the highest spot. The CO was later relieved than he should have been. Decided rather than send out an experienced patrol, that he'd send a new guy from each platoon, a couple new guys from each platoon, and a couple shake and bakes. Shake and bakes were people that went straight from basic training to an NCO school and were promoted to sergeant, and they never sent to us as our leaders. But these people had no experience. Although I included the 2 shake and bake sergeants in that group, they were also new. Sent to it. They had the rank of sergeant, but none of them had been in patrol in experience. They were ambushed and 6 of them were killed. One of them was able to run back down to the fire base and get out. The next day I was supposed to fly back to base to go on R&R. The squad leader, not my squad leader, a shake and bake in my platoon, asked if I'd walk point for them out there. After explaining that I was supposed to go on R&R. If you miss your R&R, you'd have to sign up for another one. You might have to wait a month or months. I agreed. After getting up there and looking around, he said it was time to head back. But we weren't going back the way we'd come. But we're going to go down around the fire base and walk up on the other side. I again explained that I needed to get back in order not to miss my R&R, and that I wasn't going to walk point that way. He said to me that I'm giving you a lawful order to walk point. I said, F you. Maybe you should train one of your squad to walk point. He then went to radio back to the platoon and came back with the same. I'm giving you a lawful order, direct lawful order to walk point. To which I responded, F you. We then walked around the bottom and I was able to, with someone else walking point, able to get a bird back early the following morning. I made my R&R. I never heard another thing about it. Most of us expected to die. Or at least have a high percentage chance of it. This reduced our fear. The biggest fear you have is the unknown. But when we got short, like less than a month, in R&R it was similar to being short because we were actually going to get out of there for a week. We begin to believe that, hey, maybe I'll get out of this okay. Our fear increased then. 4th Infantry was sent back to the States. Of course, the only one that goes is the generals and the flag and a few people that were real short. I had a couple months left, so they transferred me to a mechanized infantry. Those were 2 of our tanks. That's the APC I was the commander on. It was a major difference from what I experienced because we could carry everything we wanted, all the ammo, water, food, and we had protection. But on the other hand, it was very noisy. These guys that were in my squad had no idea how to patrol. I sat on the top as the M50 in front of me in communication with the platoon, and the driver sat down there. Although I'd never go through this given the choice, I benefited from by learning how far I can be pushed. Plus, I appreciate most that Americans take for granted. Like no one is trying to kill me. Running water, showers, a roof over my head, clean clothes, nights and weekends off, chocolate, cold soda, fast food, cars, women, and peace and quiet. So what was my compensation? I received a room, punch over me on the ground, board, sea rations, and pay. Most soldiers in Vietnam earned the rank of E4, which is a specialist or corporal before their was up. I was an E5 sergeant. And E4 earned $231.60 plus $65 hospital pay a month. Since we worked about 20 hours a day, when you include nighttime watch and ambush, for about 28 days a month, that adds up to about 49 cents an hour in straight time pay. Of course, if we were paid time and a half for all work over 4 hours, it would be much less. This is a difficult topic for me to talk on, but I think it's probably good for me. I want to thank Dorman for his help in setting this up. If you have any questions, don't worry about my feelings or whether I'm able. If I don't want to answer, I'll tell you that. But I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
What year were you there?
I was in 1970. There was a good question in that I went to a new barber shop in Ballston Spa. I found Target, a new barber, and he asked me. I don't know why we were even talking about Vietnam. I didn't do that much with people. He asked me what year I was there. I said I was in there in 1970. He was never in the service, but he immediately started denigrating my service by saying that he knew people who were there in 1968 or 67, and they said nothing happened after that point. We're buddies. You know, I should have ripped off that collar and walked out. I didn't, but I wouldn't put up with that again. No. People denigrated our service as a regular thing. They'd come back. One of the first things they wanted to know was I on the front line? No, I wasn't in the front line. Was I in the thick of it? And then they always wanted to tell me about how, yeah, well, they knew someone who was killed, or they knew someone who was in the thick of it, or I'll be honest with you, the people who had it worse than I did were obviously all the infantry that had to fight in villages, but also all the other people in Vietnam, because when they got back, they had to put up with all these questions from people who didn't have a clue what they'd put up with, and they had a lot of stresses that we didn't have. They were exposed to drugs and boredom and abuse when they got back. We were told, don't wear your uniforms home, just forget about it and move on with your life. Good question.
So after you've had a lot of time to reflect on it, what's your view of the whole war?
Well, I think from the point of view of, there were definitely NVA soldiers there in South Vietnam, so I think it's fair to say that we were fighting in a civil war and helping the South Vietnamese. But we should have been there. It was a no-win situation. I really believe that a lot of wars are pushed with the idea it helps our economy, it helps the military-industrial complex. We would use up, like the M50 was a machine gun that was packed in grease from World War II. We used ammo that was years old, multiple years old, that was allowed to burn up. They actually said at one time we were sent to it, we landed as LZ. They gave us a new 60 barrel and they asked us to burn up the old 60 barrel because apparently they ordered extra 60 barrels. So we were in the middle of the jungle and we were firing on an M60 full out until it melted and then we replaced the barrel. Which was a lot of fun, by the way. An M60 is a fun weapon to fight from, shoot from the hip because you watch the tracers go, you can bring it anywhere you want. But it's not a fun weapon to fight with. Yes.
Were you there at all during the so-called rainy season? I've been told that it was a completely different world than during the dry season. Literally a different world.
Yeah. The monsoons. So, it was a little bit similar to Fort Lewis, Washington, that it rained all the time, except it wasn't so cold. So, you adjusted to it. You know, you adjusted to mosquitoes, you adjusted to the dirt. You adjusted the fact you only got a shower once a month. You adjusted the fact that you were, the only clothes I had was a shirt, you can look at that if you like, and pants. I didn't wear other pants or other shirts. And then when the helicopter would come to resupply, we'd get a new, not a new, but another uniform, and we hoped it fit us. The first time, my uniform, I think, was like a 46 short. So I had literally shorts on, and here I was a skinny kid with nothing. But from that point on, I was usually quicker at getting more rapid size. Yes.
Have you been back, or would you go back?
I wouldn't go back.
No.
And yet some of it's beautiful country, but I wouldn't go back.
I just went on and looked at some statistics for the war. There was 58,000 U.S. military fatalities, and there was an estimated 2 million Vietnamese civilians that died, and 11 million Vietnamese became refugees. There was 200 and 50,000 South Vietnamese that died. Now compare that to World War I. There was over 16 million people that died in World War II. World War II, there was 50 to 80 million people killed. That's, I think, is super statistics.
I just spent a lot of time telling Holly how tough we had it. The NBA had it so much worse than us. They had that in minigun shooting at them on a regular basis. They didn't have resupply like we had. They had to live off the land. I'm sure a lot of them died and no one ever knew where they were or who they were or anything else. In general, our people took our bodies back and reclaimed them. We were in jungles that were both beautiful and mean or cruel. I actually saw a live orangutan once, but normally we didn't see many animals because they would stay away from us. But there was a large orange orangutan. He screamed at us and was running away through the jungle.
Comment on what you said, Corbin. Anybody who has ever stood in front of the Vietnamese War wall in Washington and looked at 58,000 names of those killed, it might as well have been 58 million.
The other thing I'd like to say too is that because of the way the Vietnam veterans were treated and weren't welcomed back, when you meet a Vietnam veteran, I appreciate if you'd welcome them back. There's a trend right now to treat our veterans much nicer, and I really appreciate that. But PSD thing that we have treatment for our veterans now wasn't in the Vietnam War. It was just forget about it, move on with their life. There's a high suicide rate of veterans now. I'm sure the suicide rate of Vietnam veterans would be many times. Either self-medicating with alcohol or just outright suicide. Yes.
I know you read off the statistics of people that had died in Vietnam, but they're still dying. My brother is one of them that might be dying too from Agent Orange. And he goes to the Veterans Hospital in Atlanta, and he's tested all the time. And there are many that are still have survived, but not are surviving. So those will be statistics that will be added to that wall and to the numbers that died from Vietnam. So it's not just the ones that we see on that wall now, but there are the others. My brother was a medic in Vietnam, and he had survived, but he was under all of the Agent Orange. Every time they dropped that thing, or those things, you know, he was there getting the wounded as soon as they got hit. So it was not a wonderful time in my family's life. We here in the United States, my mom and dad were getting telephone calls in the middle of the night saying, your son's a baby killer. You deserve to die. We had horrible things happen to our family just because he was drafted by Johnson, and when he was blind, colorblind, so he couldn't be an engineer, which what he was down at GE. He was an engineer. But because he was completely colorblind, they said you have a choice. You can be a cook or you can be a medic. And we have enough cooks, so you're going to be a medic, because it doesn't matter what color blood is. But it did matter. Every time they shot up at a thing about whether Charlie was in the area or not, it was red or green. He never knew what it was. So he had to run one way or the other. It was a horrible time for him. He came back so thin, still has problems. My sister-in-law who passed away said he would still wake up in the middle of the night with these horrible dreams. So they're still dying. It's not just the end of the statistics.
Maybe a note of humor.
Put your mic up again.
Note of humor, maybe. First of all, that's real, but realistically, your brother won't be added to that wall. Your brother won't be added to that wall. He should be, but he won't be. And I went on a hockey trip with a friend of mine, and we talked a little bit about Vietnam on the way. And in the hotel room, I said, Ernie, at night, if I wake up screaming, it's important you hold really still. I was kidding.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you for coming.
Well, if anyone wants a souvenir,